towards Jesus. Full stop. Then what made me even worried? There was a woman who was teaching us divinity. She had gaps between her teeth, but she could pronounce it better than me. So I was competing with that woman that if someone who has gaps in between the teeth and can pronounce it better than me, then what about me? So we are learning. Let's go. Bath Gospel. Yeah, it is next one. It is in Bath Gospel, I mean. In Bath Gospels, in Bath Gospels, Jesus suffers. Full stop. In Bath Gospels, Jesus suffers. Some of you might think I'm a motivation speaker, but that is the case. For me, I've been going through a lot, and I'm still going through a lot. After enduring all and succeeding, I will make them history for others, the way I'm now telling you. By that time, I was passing through that period, and it was not easy for me. But when we pass through it, it will become history. Jesus suffers, full stop. To continue, the passion narratives share the main events. The passion narratives share the main events, starting with his entry into Jerusalem. The passion narratives share the main, passion narratives from the word narrative or narration. The passion narratives share the main events, starting with his entry into Jerusalem. Up to the time of his death. Death was another pronunciation which disturbed me. Now, when I was doing my first school practice, into Jerusalem up to the time of his death. When I was for my school practice, for me I was pronouncing it dead. Then the senior twos of CRE came to me. They didn't come to me, but they just told me they don't pronounce it death. They say death. So I was pronouncing death, till I also mastered the way they want me to pronounce. But I feel my pronunciation was okay for that. Next point. In both Gospels, Jesus spends 3 days in the grave. In both Gospels, Jesus spends 3 days in the grave. Spends 3 days. Then there is another problem also. Okay. Jesus spent 3 days in the grave. In both Gospels, Jesus spends 3 days in 3 days in the grave and resurrects. Full stop. In the grave and resurrects. Full stop. Now for the case of theory, I'm not yet sure with my pronunciation, but I believe you understand. I've been getting it from different people the way they pronounce, but I don't ask them that how do you pronounce theory. You will find other people are pronouncing theory as theory. They're saying it theory like this. Now for me, I want that theory to be theory. You will find other people are saying theory, something like that. So for me, I always go with mine, but I think for that one of free will work for me. If I want to be perfect, free. But your F should be hearable. You should be able to hear. Theory. But for me, let me go with mine, theory. Next. Both record Disciples slow understanding. Birth record. Birth record. Disciples birth record. Record. Birth record. Disciples lack of understanding. Lack of understanding of Jesus. Lack of understanding of Jesus. Full stop. Birth record. The disciples' lack of understanding of Jesus. Full stop. I would like to give you this, but in exam you will not need them. You will put as NP anything which can make you understand that it is important thing. The following are the events. 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 The following are the events which both gospel have in common. The following are the events which both gospel have in common. Which both gospel have in common. Which both gospel have in common. Number 1, narrative and sayings about John the Baptist. Narrative and sayings about John the Baptist. Narratives. Narratives. Narratives and sayings about John the Baptist. I want to encourage you to become teachers. Never feel pity for a teacher. Becoming teacher is another lesson for you. Do you think I want to be teacher forever? It is because of the mistakes I've been making in the past. That's why I resorted to become a teacher. So through you I will learn, and after learning I will leave the course. I will leave the profession. But leave. Number 2, cleansing of the temple. Cleansing of the temple. Cleansing of the temple. Cleansing of the temple. Number 3, feeding of the multitude. Feeding of the multitude. Feeding of the multitude. Feeding of the multitude. Walking on the leg. Multitude. Next is walking on the leg. Walking on the leg. Are you done with that? I want also to talk about that one. Because it is another confusion I have in life. Walking on the leg. Feeding the multitude, then the next one is walking on the leg. So for the case of walking, for me I call it walking. I always realize when I make that mistake. That's why when I make it in the first time, for the second time I try to correct it. There is a person of P5. I asked him when he's a son to my landlord when I was at the hostel. So I asked him, I said, how are you? He said, I'm fine. He's very good he's very fluent at English. So I said, where are you from? He said, I'm from Evening Walk. Then I realized, I said, oh, they call it walk, Evening Walk. Okay. So whenever anyone asks me that where are you from, I always try to say I'm from Evening Walk, but for me I always say Evening Walk. And people will ask for my pardon. That what? Evening Walk? Have you started working? Then from there I can correct myself from Evening Walk. I should not make it A but O. For those of you who have learned it, for those of you who have learned it, it is your opportunity. But for me, I'm still another way to learn that. Then another one, Peter's confession. Peter's confession. Confession. Peter's confession. Peter's confession. Yes. Next one, prediction of betrayal. Prediction of betrayal. Prediction of betrayal. Prediction of betrayal. For me, I always learn from stories. There was a time, one fork. That fork, I'm meaning the fork which is animal. That animal went, it went somewhere, I think, to steal something from the garden. But finding there, the man had set the trap. So that fork got trapped in the trap. After getting trapped, in the process of removing himself, he tried, but at the end he found his tail getting lost of him. I don't know if it was a he or a she, but the tail got lost. So that fork went to the friends and he summoned a meeting. So in the process, he said, I'm summoning this meeting with only one agenda. And the agenda is, if we can all agree, let us remove our tails. Because the tail is making us look ugly. Then the second thing, the tail is making us not to fight well with our enemies like dogs. Then the friends look at him and say, my friend, we heard you saying that, but we believe you are saying it so because you have lost yours. Otherwise, if you have not lost yours, you will not advise us to diminish with our tails. From there, I learned something. That sometimes even if you have problems, use your problems to turn others into that way. No, that part, problems, your problems should not be something of something admired. Use your problem to influence others. Although his friends refused his idea, I believe that fork went ahead with another idea because he wanted to fit in the community of the foxes. So let's continue. Another one. Accusation that Jesus is possessed. Accusation that Jesus. Let me check this. Accusation that Jesus is possessed. Accusation that Jesus is possessed. I learned the difference between accusation and accusation. Did I call it accusation? For me, I used to call it accusation, but through divinity, I learned that they call it accusation. So as teachers come, you should learn from them. And things which are not supposed to be learned, you leave them. Next, Jesus is anointed. I want to highlight all these things because they will help us when giving differences between these two gospels. Jesus is anointed. Next, Jesus rides into the city. Jesus rides into the city. Rides into the city. Next, Jesus has supper with his disciples. Jesus has supper with his disciples. Jesus has supper with his disciples. Don't write super, write supper. Supper is with double P. Jesus has supper with his disciples. Next, Jesus is betrayed by Judas. Jesus is betrayed by Judas and is arrested. Jesus is betrayed by Judas and is arrested. Next, Jesus appears before the Jewish court. Jesus appears before the Jewish court. Before the Jewish court. Next, Peter denies Jesus. Peter denies Jesus. You will use this outline when giving similarities. This outline which you see we are just outlining or we are just stating. You can use them to make points by saying in both this and this, in both this and this, when you are running short of points. But if you have enough points, then you can leave them out. Next. Jesus, okay, you make it Jesus appear before Pilate or Pilate. Jesus appear before Pilate or Pilate. Jesus appear before Pilate. Jesus is buried. Then let's look at the differences. The last one is Jesus is buried. You will allow me to only read because I feel explaining these things will take us a lot of time. And when I see our coverage, it's not all good. So let us just read. You will understand as you are reading. Let us just write. You will understand as you are reading. Differences between John's and Mark's Gospel. Differences between John and Mark's Gospel. Point number one, in John, the Messiahship of Jesus is open. The Messiahship of Jesus is open. The Messiahship of Jesus is open. While in Mark, it is hidden. While in Mark, it is hidden. While in Mark, it is hidden. Next point. In John, Jesus is declared as a Messiah 21 times. That point which you are writing, it is a continuation of the first point. It is a continuation of the first point. In John, Jesus is declared as a Messiah 21 times. While in Mark, Gospels hide Jesus' Messiahship. I pardon. In John, Jesus is declared as a Messiah 21 times. While in Mark's Gospel, while in Mark's Gospel, Jesus' Messiahship is hidden. In Mark, next point, in Mark, the supernatural acts of Jesus, in Mark, the supernatural acts of Jesus, in Mark, the supernatural acts of Jesus are termed as miracles. The supernatural acts of Jesus are termed as miracles. In Mark, the supernatural acts of Jesus are termed as miracles. Whereas in John, there are signs. There are signs. Full stop, continue. There are 7 signs. There are 7 signs through which the divinity and glory of Jesus is revealed. There are 7 signs through which the divinity and glory of Jesus is revealed. Next point, the order and details of events in John. The order and details of events in John. The order and details of events. Details of events in John differ significantly from the order. Differ significantly from the order and details in Mark. Differ significantly from the order and details in Mark. Full stop, continue. Apart from the cleansing of the temple, comma, Jesus walking on water. Apart from cleansing of the temple, comma, Jesus walking on water. Jesus walking on water, comma, the feeding of the 5,000. The feeding of the 5,000. And passion narratives. And passion narratives. And passion narratives. And passion narratives. The rest of the events are presented differently. The rest of the events are presented differently. I know sometimes you feel embarrassed when one point is taking so much lines, but I want you to add details when writing your exams. Otherwise, this same book which you see I'm using has the same points. I think they extracted points from this. They extracted the points which I have to explain the points of this book. They are the same, but this one is more detailed compared to this one. That's why I want to give you detailed notes, such that when you are reading, you have enough content. Before I told you that this paper, you don't need to write a lot, but sometimes you have to explain a bit. Next point, in John, Judah and Jerusalem, Judea and Jerusalem is the center of Jesus' work. This time I'm meaning work. In John, Judah and Jerusalem is the center of Jesus' work. While in Mark, Jesus centers his work in Galilee. While in Mark, Jesus centers his work in Galilee. Okay, full stop and we continue. According to John, Jesus visits Jerusalem several times. According to John, Jesus visits Jerusalem several times. Visits Jerusalem several times. But in Mark, he visits it only once. But in Mark, he visits it only once. Visits it only once. Full stop. Next. In John, Jesus' teaching method differ from the method he used in Mark. In John, Jesus' teaching methods differ from the methods he used in Mark. In John, Jesus' teaching methods differ from the methods he used in Mark. In John, Jesus' teaching methods differ from the methods he used in Mark. From the method he used in Mark. Full stop. Continue. In the Gospel according to John, Jesus taught using lengthy discourses. Whereas in Mark, Jesus taught using short parables. Whereas in Mark, Jesus taught using short parables. Whereas in Mark, Jesus taught using short parables. Full stop. Next point. Next point. There are more indications of time in the Gospel according to John. There are more indications of time in the Gospel according to John. There are more indications of times of time. There are more indications of time in the Gospel according to John than in Mark. Full stop. There are more indications of time in the Gospel according to John than in Mark. Full stop. Full stop. Continue. Judging from the three Passovers, Jesus attended in John. Judging from the three Passovers, Jesus attended in John. Judging from the three Passovers, Jesus attended in John. Judging from the three Passovers, Jesus attended in John, it is possible to calculate that Jesus' ministry took about 3 years. It is possible to calculate that Jesus' ministry took about 3 years. Full stop. Next point. While in Mark, Jesus called and chose all his disciples. Next point. It is
Next point.
It is next point.
While in Mark.
No, it is a next point and it is starting with white. Hey, next point but starting with white. Next point. While in Mark, Jesus called and chose all his disciples. While in Mark, Jesus called and chose his all disciples. And chose all his disciples, comma. In John, some of the disciples were handed over. While in Mark, Jesus called and chose all his disciples, comma. In John, some of the disciples were handed over to him by John the Baptist. While in Mark, Jesus called and chose all his disciples, comma. In John, some of the disciples were handed over to him by John the Baptist, full stop. Were handed over to him by John the Baptist. Now for you are doing CRE and you don't want to be teachers. Which other course do you want to do at the university? Swasa. Eh? I'm putting some point of concern that now for you don't want to be teachers at the university. For you don't want to choose education as a course at the university. Which course do you want to choose? Because for me, when I was even at your age, I never wanted to become a teacher. When someone talks of being a teacher, the same reaction you did today is the same I always show to people. But realizing it is tiresome. Teaching is not a talent. For me, I never knew I can teach even. Yeah? Yeah? I should never say. You don't want to teach, that's what I know. People, when they are in high school, they don't want to become a teacher. Because they see, the problem is not us. The problem is not the course. But the problem is the personality of each teacher. That's what discourages most of these people. Because you believe that when a teacher who is your neighbor is poor, you will also be poor like that teacher. That's what you always think. But that is not the case. Wealth comes with wisdom. If you are wise, even if you earn less money, you will become rich. When I joined Senior 5, my CRE teacher, madam, with the gaps in the teeth, asked that how many wants to become teacher. Everyone reacted the same way you reacted. She told us that teaching is good. Only that with teaching you don't get money immediately. Some courses you get your money immediately. Every day you get the money. But with teaching you have to wait after months. But for us, we show as if she was just convincing us. But reaching, when I was applying for the university, I put teaching number one. The course I wanted to do, which was law, it never appeared in my choice when I was joining university. Someone told me that you will be given that course in Gulu University. The problem came because my point never reached the way I wanted it. I expected good points, but coming to the last, the point I got was very less. And I made it that if I'm to become a lawyer, I should become a lawyer from Makerere. If I'm to become a lawyer, then it should be from Makerere. Then there's a guy, he was even lousy. Sometimes things change. I will beat him every time in class, all subjects. But coming to UNEP, he beat me up. Now he was the one to advise me, let us go for law. At first I used to advise him, let us hear it out and we go for law. But now for me, my mind changed. I said, no, I'm not going for law. Let me go for education. Eh? Hmm? If as pardon.
Someone who wants to join the
Okay, with law, it depends from the university. Law, you can get anything in 9 points. But what you need at Makara, you need to pass pre-entry. Now, from Makara, you need to pass pre-entry. Hey, I thought you know. Pre-entry, after doing your, do you know pre-entry? Yeah, it is an interview. When you want to be a lawyer at Makara, you will need to sit for interview. And that interview is not based on what you have been taught. It is based on your common sense and your knowledge about the world. They can ask you anything. Like there was a pre-entry where they asked, which part of the body differentiate human being? Which part of the body differentiate human being? According to you, which part can differentiate someone from the rest? According to you. Eh? You see, it is a simple question, but you cannot answer. Eh? Someone is saying nose. Head. Head is not part. Is head a part of the body?
No, sir,
Hmm? The answer was ear. Hey, the answer was ear. Your ear can differentiate you from the person. You know, sometimes people are born twins, identical twins. They look related to each other. So the best way to differentiate those people, you can only differentiate with their ears. And that was the question. And for you to pass pre-entry, you must get 50 and above. Sometimes they make it 65, depending on the performance. Now, pre-entry, very few people can pass it. And most of the people who pass, they bribe, they give money to the people who mark. Because in a real sense, they believe that no one can pass pre-entry. Immediately you have applied for law. Okay. If you fail, then you will not go for the course of law. Eh? No, it is because, there is their perception that courses like medicine and law, they are best done in Makerere. Just like people say from Chambo, we believe that education is the best, but that is not the case. I'm doing my school practice here, but those people who are from Guru, they're teaching me how to make lesson plans. For me, I don't know. Those are just perceptions. And for us to go by the society, we have to use their perception. If you want to be the best, you always have to use perception, whereby you do things which people expect good. And for me, I chose to go there because I knew when I come from there, maybe I will get some differences. But I realized there's nothing different. Only that the perception makes things different. We have many teachers who are there. They are actually and other tribes from northern Uganda. They don't want to come here because of shame. The shame is because they see what they thought they would find there is not what they have got. And now coming back here the same way you went, no one will see different in you, and someone who remains here is more than even you. And because of shame, they are remaining there, and they will die there poor. I don't want to talk much about that. There was a time, that story you always know it, but I always like to say to people. Mr. Air, Mr. Air is the rabbit. Mr. Air was bragging in the whole community of the animals that for him he is the fastest animal among all animals in the world, rebuking even animals like leopard who are known to be fast, lions who are known to be fast, cheetah who are known to be the fastest. Now, people were relaxed that now that Mr. Hare is saying that he's the fastest, let's leave it to Mr. Hare, he's the fastest. But Turtles came and said, no, for me I want to compete with Mr. Hare. Even if I'm slow, I want to compete with him. So they organized that race between Mr. Air and the tortoise. After organizing the race, they started the race. They called for the race and they started the race. Now reaching on the way, Mr. Hare, realizing that he's very fast than the tortoise, he decided to first sit under the tree and relax. And while he was relaxing, he got asleep. Now Mr. Tortoise was behind, moving slowly without relaxing. Now Mr. Hare, after relaxing, he got asleep and Mr. Tortoise was moving. After he had woken from the sleep, it was at that time that Mr. Tortoise was reaching the finishing point. Now he realized that he was for a race, realizing that he should start the race at the fastest speed. It was too late for him. That was Mr. Hare and the tortoise. So people who were at the finishing race praised Mr. Tortoise that now you have won, Mr. Hare. Mr. Hare came with a complaint that for him, he got asleep. And if possible, they should organize it again. But people said no, they have won you. The same thing is what is happening to the undergraduate youth. To the graduate youth, I mean. People are finishing education, but they don't know where to run. The reason why I want you to do education is because you will never rely on parents after your education. That is the only reason. You will never rely on your parents after your education. You will start your own life and hustle. Okay, that is the case. For me, I don't eat from my parents' home. I eat from school because of education or because I'm doing education. But people who are doing engineering, you have to first go back to your parents' home. You wait for someone to call you that you have a job. But there are very many engineers when you go to Chambog. There are very many. And you will pity them that, where are these people going? There are very many like this. Yet only one engineer can make a contract of building the whole road in Uganda. Then where are the rest going? I want to give you this scenario. No, it is not a must, but we have to guide you at your early age. For me, I want to guide you. I want to guide you on the fact that just take yourself, you are alone in the world. Take yourself that you don't have anyone who will look for you a job. There are other people who have jobs already. But I don't say it in your lot. Because those things happen when people were still realizing that education was good. You'll find someone is already secured a job. But it is not in your period, this period of ours, it was back then. But I will always guide you because I know you are young and you don't know where the world is going by now. Accounting. Every year at Chambog they produce 800 accountants every year. Gulu University they produce 400. Makerere produce 900, and other universities which I cannot even say about them. You calculate where are those people going. Anyway, all courses are good. What you need is you. Your brain should work. How many points are there? Few. Okay, next. The beginning of the gospel according to John. The beginning of the gospel according to John. It is another point. It is another point. The beginning of the gospel according to John. The first from the beginning of the gospel according to Mark. The first from the beginning. No. First make a pause. Let me read again and you understand. The beginning of the gospel according to John differs from the beginning of Mark, full stop. Differs from the beginning of Mark. The beginning of the gospel according to John differs from the beginning of Mark, full stop. Continue. John begins from the end. John begins from the eternity. John begins from the eternity. John begins from the eternity by referring to the creation times. Begins from the eternity by referring to the creation times. By referring to the creation times. Whereas Mark begins with Isaiah's prophetic times. Mark begins with the Isaiah prophetic times. Isaiah prophetic times. Whereas Mark begins with Isaiah's prophetic times. For John's gospel, you right? No, you first leave. For me, I always like talking and it always disturbs. Isaiah's prophetic times, full stop. Begins with Isaiah's prophetic times. I want to say this. With John's gospel, though it is not very straight, the first beginning of John's gospel saying, in the beginning there was a word. In the beginning makes it the creation time. That word in the beginning makes it a creation time. We leave. I have to make extra lesson with you, not for money, but for your own benefit. Most of the extra lesson they make for money. But for me, I want at least to go far with this gospel. I should not make. I should make an extra lesson because I want to take you far. I will not finish it, that's what I know, but I want to take you far. Sometimes when you are writing exams, listening to imagining the words that the person who teach you was saying can make you understand. So I want a lot of John's gospel, maybe if I can cover much of it. Such as when you are writing John's gospel, you can listen to my voice.